America is poised to enter the next decades of the 21st century hand in hand with the technology that could possibly define it, artificial intelligence. Decades of innovation and entrepreneurship have led to this point, from industry titans of NVIDIA to innovation centers like St. Louis's own geospatial hub. America is ahead in the AI race and has the resources to double down on its unique advantages. Yet, America's position in AI is under constant pressure. China is investing billions and billions into its own AI industry. Some of this investment is for AI surveillance technology to export their malignant surveillance state abroad. There's no telling what could happen if China became the dominant player in the 21st century. I'm sure China is watching us, Europe is too, hoping that we bury our burgeoning AI industry in unnecessary regulation and lose sight of what got us in this position in the first place. The worst thing we could do in this race towards AI is stifle innovation by unleashing the bureaucrats and putting crippling regulations onto innovators. The EU has done this, and now Europe will now most likely be watching this race from the sidelines. Yet there have been rumblings here on Capitol Hill and fancy summits all over the world that the U.S. should overregulate this industry. This would only serve to hamstring our innovation and give China the keys to this amazing technology. I want to zero in on this because I think this is a common theme that we hear about as far as over-regulating, and I think the American way here is we're concerned about this. But I want to drill down on that a little bit, and maybe, Mr. Thier, I'll start with you. What do we mean by that? Like, how would you define that? Colorado has passed some regulations that even their governor has questioned. And just using that as one example, what is it that we should be concerned about in this framework?
Certainly. Thank you for the question. First of all, as of noon today, there are 754 AI bills pending across the United States of America. 642 of those bills are at the state level. That does not include all the city-based bills. Probably the most important AI bill that's passed so far is New York City. Not New York State, New York City. And so there's patchworks and then there's patchworks, right? And so the cumbersome nature of all those compliance rules added on top of each other, even if well-intentioned, can be enormously burdensome to AI innovators and entrepreneurs. So that's just one thing to note. The other thing to note is that there's been discussions about the idea of like overarching new bureaucracies or certain types of licensing schemes. I have no problem with existing licensing schemes as applied in the narrow focused areas where AI might be applied, whether it's medicine, drones, driverless cars. But an overarching new licensing regime for all things AI is going to be incredibly burdensome. That's a European approach. We don't want that. And Senator, let me just say something about your China point, because this is really important. We're here on June 4th. This is the 35th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. And when we talk about the importance of getting this right for America and our global competitiveness, it's important for exactly the reason you pointed out. Because if we don't and China succeeds, then they're exporting their values, their surveillance systems, their censorship. The very fact that I just uttered the term Tiananmen Square at this hearing means this hearing won't be seen in China. I apologize for that to everyone else here. But the bottom line is that means that what's at stake is geopolitical competitiveness and security and our values as a nation. And so this is why we have to get it right.
So it's interesting because when I was going to school, the idea was that the more literate a society became, the more educated they became, the more open they became, the more likely they were to become a democracy, right? And China was kind of always an example. Maybe if there are fewer poor people there and they're more literate, that ultimately they'll demand more. But interestingly, AI has uniquely, and very low-tech AI as it relates to surveillance, empowered communist regimes, right? It empowers a totalitarian level of control that 30 years ago, I'm not sure anybody could really foresee. And that's certainly what they've capitalized on, to your point. And if people think that is a way to maintain power, which has been the way of the world in many places, you're right. They become the dominant player in this. I do want to just shift with a little bit of the time they have left. And anybody please chime in on this point. But I'll start with you, Mr. Thier, again. Big tech versus little tech here. I think there's a concern, at least that I have, that a regulatory scheme or we're doing something that sort of protects the big players but ultimately leaves out the innovation, again, that got us to this point now. How do you view this, and what can we do to guard against that? Because I do think there's some folks that want more sort of a protectionist view of the big players here, and they have all the answers, and they're very important players, but not the only players. And how do you guard against this shutting out little tech in this process?
Amen to that. So let's take a look at Europe. I mean, one of the things I always ask my students or crowds that I talk to about AI policy or technology policy is I say, name me a leading digital technology innovator headquartered in European Union today. Silence, right? That has everything to do with getting policy wrong. And what European Union is doing right now, the only thing they're exporting on the digital technology front is regulation. And basically that's all they've got left. And they're trying to regulate mostly large American tech companies. And so what's ironic about their regulatory regime is it was meant to sort of like keep things more in check and competitive, but there's only a handful of large technology companies that can comply with those rules and regulations. We don't want that to happen in the United States. We have thousands upon thousands of small entrepreneurial companies starting up in the AI space right now. And this is the hope for the future, especially open source technology. You know, right here in America, that's happening on the ground. We have got to preserve that entrepreneurial, you know, freedom to innovate kind of model for the United States so we don't become the innovation backwater that is the European Union.
Thank you. Thank you.